some hard shit this week.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Well, this is again because of Chris. He said my hard thing would be not doing a hard thing I wanted to do. So yesterday, I already had done my ride, and I looked at the forecast and it said rain for the next 3 days. So I said, you know what, I think I'm gonna go for a second ride. But I said, don't do it. Don't do it. It'll be a negative experience. You'll be exhausted and like this is. But I really wanted to, but I said, no, don't do it.
Okay.
That was my hard thing.
Sometimes it's the mental hard thing.
Yeah.
Not do it.
Yeah.
What else? What else did you do last week?
2 minutes in the cold plunge. I actually felt more comfortable. I should have gone for longer, but yeah.
Doing it.
Doing it, yeah. It's becoming less scary going in because I know the shiver is going to stop eventually.
Was that your first time?
No, it's
No. Okay.
just kind of getting back to it. Long break.
Okay, so quick review, right? So first session we talked about foundations of performance mindset, psychology, those overcoming hard things, what that means, what we can do, defining some terms. Last session we covered offline tools. So if you remember, offline tools is the foundation for expanding your zone of resilience. So everything we covered today is things you do in real time right now in the middle of whatever hard thing you're doing. Offline tools gives you the space to do this in real time. Without doing the offline tools, the real time tools often have a hard time sticking or actually working in time. So if we remember some of our offline tools, so offline tools, right? Meditation, breath work, great tools. What else did we talk about? Journaling, creating that body of evidence of things that we can do, or things that we've done in the past. So for some, it's I've done a bunch before. Other times it's I don't need this, like finding evidence of why we should rest. I feel better when I take more rest, or I don't push myself over the limit. But it's all context based. You obviously have a coach that guide that. Those that don't tend to spiral in this like, should I do it? Should I not do it? Can I do this? Can I should do this? And you're doing it and you feel like crap, and then it's like, well, I feel like crap. So you're usually not like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. It's like, oh, it's hot, I'm tired, I didn't eat, I didn't rest well last night. It's every excuse but the actual kind of linchpin. So practicing those things, building that evidence prior to, especially when we're calm, is what helps reshape the mindset of what you can do and what's possible. And everything we're going today is kind of what we talk about right now is why tools work if they've been trained offline first. Rewire, real time, so a 3-step process. We'll go through 5 real-time tools. Handling failure in real time, 3-step failure, response, when tools don't work, what to do, and then whole performance mindset framework, creating like that. So, kind of like we talked about, right? You're always gonna fall back to your level of training, what you trained in your calm. You never rise to the occasion. It's always falling back to whatever level of training. So if you don't handle the basics first, and you expect to do that on game day, you're setting yourself up for failure. So practicing these things when you are calm, when you can really think about these things in a little bit deeper of a mental space, will allow you to be able to apply it when we're talking about the real time things. So, rewiring in real time. So, again, you practice this in offline scenarios. This can help switch that, make that switch real fast. So, 3 steps: recognize, right? Recognize whatever self-talk you're going through. Usually it's negative. Right? Our brains are wired for negative. Call it out. Hey, you are spiraling. You're telling yourself all these things. bring a name to it, be specific. The more specific you can get, the better, because now you can nip it in the butt. Win and reframe. So interrupt it and redirect it. So win is what's important now, and what can you do now? Because everything in the moment is all action based. There's no time to stop and think of like, oh, what if this, what if that? It's how do I redirect all of this to that outcome? And then execute, which is that action. So making sure we kind of go through its. The goal here is to make it as simple as possible, so that way when you are having those moments when you're in the middle of a workout, in the middle of a ride, my foot hurts, everything's burning, it's hot, I can't do this right now, I'm hungry, I have all this stuff I have to do at home. How do you make that switch to figure out, okay, if I'm doing this right now anyways, how do I execute for this? So the first two tools. Psychological chunking, I think we talked about this at the very end of the last session of presentation here, is breaking down the overarching goal into small, palatable chunks. It's a very useful tool, right? It's like what we talked about is like how do you know how do you conquer something step. So rather than looking at I gotta climb this 14,000 foot mountain, let me just get to the next 3 miles. Let me get to that next ridge. Let me get however small you need to break it up, like it's very useful. I'll give you a little anecdote. When I was doing a lot of pool training, a lot of apnea stuff with breath holds and weights and swimming, breathing, the tool I always switch to is get to the next level. It's we do 2 more strokes. It's something as small as count your strokes. And that way it gets my mind off of, oh shit, I gotta go all the way back again. I don't want to throw it away. How do I figure that out? It's just, how do I break this down into such a small piece that I can focus on my execution versus the end goal, what I have to do. Big thing though is it prevents catastrophic cognitive projection, right? So seeing the massive amounts of things you can do to short executable items. Usually it's used when you're overwhelmed, you really focusing on the outcome before it happens. Before I move on, questions on psychological training. It's probably the easiest, most straightforward one you can use that anytime. Especially like in the middle of a set, just get to the next rep. Get to the next rep, whatever it may be. Second one, win. What's important now? So, anxiety is always stress about the future. It's something that hasn't happened. So what's important now is pulling yourself back into the present versus the outcome or the potential future execution of whatever it may be. So think, decide, and act. Super easy way to kind of flip the switch of getting to the present. How do I execute what I need to do right now to be successful in the future? Reducing whatever complex situation or scenario you're in into that next level of action. So again, using it when you're overwhelmed, overthinking of 10 different things you can do. Just do the most actionable, the lowest hanging fruit to get you to that next step. Tool 3, self-talk and mantras. So we've talked about this in the previous talk. We kind of introduced some of these. Mantras are a great tool to get you through any scenario. There's 4 different types: identity, connected to who you identify yourself as; evidence-based, so Chris's example of you've done this before; reframe, so reframe the environment and scenario you're going through; and then motivation, so telling yourself that you feel as motivation will get you over that. Now, it's important to work through multiple variations of each of these categories, because not all mantras will work, and not all mantras work for you. So I might have, for example, that says you're built for this. But for Chris, that might not work. Because he doesn't have that evidence or the perception of whatever he's known through his life to have that kind of identity. So practicing, figuring out which ones work, which ones don't. But again, going through hard stuff and then using these mantras in real time. And you're like, I can't do this. Using these mantras and figuring out, did that work or did you just kind of ignore it and waste your head? If you ignore it, obviously it's a waste of your time. You're trying to force it into it. But yeah, so it must produce a felt shift when you say it. It feels hollow, it's not right. So making sure you have an emotional response in the moment to that is a big indication. So for myself, I don't usually use no for this, but usually I say something like, you said this to me, or you just did. Because now in my head, my experiences is lead by example. So I'm setting an example for everybody else. That's what gets me to do a lot of things. But figure out what works for people. Some people might need more identity based. Some people might need more motivation based. Figuring out which category is best for you. Tool number 4 is the reset routine. So it's kind of like what we talked about last session, but it's sequencing marking end of a moment and the beginning of the next, right? So physical cue, a mantra, and task. Right? This is how you make that switch in real time of I'm feeling or hearing myself talk about this scenario negatively. It's not how you do it. Creating a trigger to then initiate this cycle of rewiring the mental process. So, easy one is the next step. It could be something like clap, it can be a jump, it can be a snap to the knee, or whatever physical cue you need to kind of snap out of it. Slowing down is usually creating space is usually the best thing. It gives you a moment, a couple of seconds to think logically, getting outside of that reptilian brain, getting into your frontal cortex to then make a logical decision. And executing a self-talk or mantra that works. If you remember from last talk, second person, third person, better than first person. So you got this, there's something like this. Talk to yourself in third person probably works as well. It's just a little weird. And then the third one is task focus. So execute on that action. So having that next step you are going to. That's when you start to execute on the things like psychological vision. Just 2-3 more reps. Just get to the next 5 reps, whatever. Get through 5 seconds. Right? And then practicing that cycle. Because that cycle is what's going to create every single time you start to go into that spiral. And the 5th one is probably my go-to for most people, especially if it's like a pre-performance anxiety, especially, but even in the moment. And all this tool does is it creates space and a moment for them to take control of the controls. The easiest thing to do is take control of your breath. Because we have full control of our breath. The nice part about taking control of your breath is it controls our nervous system. It's the only remote control we have conscious control over. We at XPT actually use this as our intro for pull punches, like I talked about. Pull punch is probably the scariest thing for a lot of people. It shows their stress response and their ability to talk to themselves in a high stress scenario in a low risk environment. So anybody who's fearful of an ice bath, we take it through this exact one. It's called CNS, not only because it stands for the central nervous system, but it's a 3-part process of get control, get nasal, slow. You don't have to repeat it 3 or 4 times. We usually go through 1 one time, and you might shift up and down that scale at any point, but the goal is to start to gather some semblance of control over the scenario. So first step is get control. I often tell people to breathe faster than they want. So what that does is it turns it into a conscious effort, but it also accelerates you under your own power and your own will. And then from there, you're able to start breathing. So when we get control, breathe faster than you want to, get nasal. And this might mean if you're in the middle of a high intensity bout, and someone's ever told you to do, like I said last time, a box breath of 4 seconds each, it's not happening. You might get one round in and you're like, I can't breathe, I need to breathe faster. That's because that's more of an offline tool versus a real-time tool, and the context are mixed and matched. Right? Because the output you need is physiological requirements is much higher than what you're able to give it. So to get control, it can literally be a hyperventilation. Right? So if I'm in the middle of a hit circuit or an AMRAP, and I'm out of breath, and I start to spiral, like I can't do this anymore. I'm already breathing hard. Sometimes I'll just go take 3 hard breaths on purpose, and that immediately takes control over my brain of like, you have control. When we get nasal, it can still be fast and powerful, but we're gonna start to switch into that nasal pathway, which starts to hit the brakes in our parasympathetic response. So it can still be right, still fast in, still fast out, but now we're starting to feather the brake a little bit, and then slow it down. Easiest thing to slow down is your exhales. And then you might not get to a full nasal breath, which is totally fine, especially in the middle of a workout, but it might go. That's already slowing it down because you're going from to a much longer breath cycle, which takes you down a couple of notches. If you're in the ice bath, you're going to have to breathe faster. Your typical response when you get some cold is to have lower anyways. So breathe faster than you want to. Again, going nasal. You might get to a when you start to feel your fingertips hurting or your toes hurting or you move and everything's cold again. You might have to speed it up again. You might have to go to a faster breath to kind of get control of it. That's totally fine. It's a scale of up and down versus one way. Again, goal is to get control and be able to think and create space. So all we're trying to do is hit the brakes enough for you to gather some control. Again, as we start to slow things down, we start to hit that parasympathetic response. And that's all we're trying to do is calm down the system a little bit to then think clearly to execute on the next action. This is probably one of the only tools you can practice in real time that's pretty effective no matter how much practice you do on offline tools, just because of the innate response of your parasympathetic nervous system when we do start to get nasal and start to Question on the CMS protocol. Yes, Tyson.
How many breaths would you do for getting control of the nasal?
But usually I don't count. If it's someone who needs like numbers, it's like 5-5. Something easy to like just latch onto. So like say, hey, do like 30 hyperventilation breaths, 15 nasal breaths, and then like 6 slow breaths. Like there's no way they're gonna know any of that. But if you go 5-5-5, you can then move up and down that scale. Something easy for them just to grab to.
I guess it kind of seems like analogous to like a car where you lose your tread and then you kind of go into the curve to get traction again. Is that kind of what's going on where your physiological response is taking over and you're like, oh, I'm going to consciously go towards the physiological response and then I'm going to curve it.
Yeah, like motorcycles, exactly. Right. When you get in trouble on a motorcycle, often the first response you're supposed to be doing is throttling in. Because you have stability when you're going fast on a motorcycle. So when in doubt, throttle out. Hit the gas. Because once you have control, then you can take over and actually brake effectively. Get out of whatever environment that you're leading towards.
And breath would be the only way, or is there like another situation where you're everyone to take a break during a workout, and then you take a break, you listen to your body, and then you, I don't know. It is, I guess the breath is the only tool.
I mean, I would say it's not the only tool, but it's probably the most effective because it just creates time. Right? Like it creates a moment for you then to like think consciously for a second. When you're stopping in the middle of a set, it's usually because you're telling you like this sucks and you're gonna die. You're dying. But like how effective are those breaks usually? Because when you get back into the set, everything's the same. Unless you're breaking for like 2 minutes, physiologically not much has changed in 10 seconds. So it's not really doing much. What it is the mental break. What you can do with that mental break is like use it effectively. Versus like sitting there like this sucks, I'm burning, not a breath, or okay, I'm gonna break, but I'm gonna take 5 hard breaths and get back at it. And what that does is just allows you to take control versus just to sit there and be like, why did I stop? This sucks. I'm turning, I'm not doing it all day. You turn that to a positive break versus the spiral that you're feeling.
It's more like a mental break reset, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's all it's like. It's just break, give yourself a pause to like figure out what you need to do, and then continue, versus like break, nothing happens, okay, go. And it also forces you to kind of start back up sooner. You're training that response of like, okay, stop. Which is tough to overcome. Once you start figuring out how to do that, you'll find yourself taking shorter and shorter and shorter breaks. Without anything.
It's kind of just a lie that you're telling yourself.
Your brain's doing what it's supposed to do. It's protecting you. So it thinks it's dying. Yeah. We're trying to effectively overcome that. Any other questions on this? Alright, so handling failure in real time, excuse me. Right, so again, reset. Use your reset routine. It can be 5 hard breaths. It can be just taking a moment and like using a mantra. Whatever your reset routine is, again, breathing is great because it creates space. It's a physical action and it slows things down. It does kind of 3 things at once. It doesn't have to be long, but just a moment to trigger this whole cycle. When? So what's important now? Don't figure out why you did something wrong. Figure out that next step. Focus on what you can do in the moment to move forward. And then narrow. So shrink your focus to the smallest possible task. Chunking applies to failure recovery. So like one thing right now. Great example from one of our advisors at XPT was talking about his Olympic trials boxing. He's boxing, he broke his shoulder on his right hand. So right-handed fighter is important. Instead of sulking and like, I can't go anymore, his thought process went immediately to, how can I win? How do I figure out how to get through this fight? That shift of, this hurts, okay, now what can I do to win? Already gets you 2 steps ahead. Because if your opponent sees you hurt, they think they have this in the bag, you're already getting a step ahead because you're continuing to push forward versus hold back and retreat. And then execute. So for someone like that, it could be keep moving, how do I get this best left hand hooking or your head to then give yourself the best possible way of overcoming that also. So 3-step process, super easy. Again, the goal is to be able to use these in the moment. So, like I said, when these tools don't work, there's usually these 5 reasons why they don't. You don't practice the offline tools. The offline tools expand your zone of resilience. Real-time tools, what they do is they bring you back when you are exceeding your boundaries, they pull you back down into zen. So you have to practice the offline tools first more frequently before these get really, really effective. Your stress exceeds your zone of resilience. Real-time tools can help, but again, these kind of link together. gotta practice the offline to make sure your zone of resilience is there for you to handle these that you have in the center. Your tools don't feel authentic, right? If your mantras don't really, you don't believe your mantras, there's no use trying to force it in. Performance mode versus learning mode. Right? Again, real-time tools is real-time. It is the things that you use on your competition day or on your training belts. Offline tools is you're learning to be able to handle that. That's what you're going back to. And then under recovery. So again, making sure you are recovered because when you are sleep deprived, stressed out, everything else gets significantly more difficult to be able to execute. You can't think straight, think about 16 other things. You can't handle that. Handling stress in the moment is going to be significantly harder because you're just adding barriers. So a lot of people talk about removing performance anchors. Like rather than adding things to your plate, what's holding you back? A lot of times it's recovery. You're not being able to filter through all the stress. You're not sleeping enough. You're not hydrating enough. You're not eating the right things to be able to handle everything else. So your whole framework, right? So session 1, we talked about identity and stress mindset, what it is, how to do it, that it is trainable. It's a trainable thing. Session 2, we talked about the offline practice and how it relates to zone of resilience. Zone of resilience is essentially your platform for how much stress you can handle. Small zone of resilience, more things get you off kilter, the more dramatic those swings are, the easier it is for you to lose control. So all we're trying to do is expand that zone of resilience and speed up the process to get back to center, get out of those high emotion states. Offline practice, again, expands your zone of resilience, real-time tools, get you to swing back to center faster. This is just a framework of what you can use for your action plan. Obviously, setting intentional practice is important. Depending on how you learn and how you structure your day, all of this, but again, setting intentional times to do hard things. When you're trying to get better, again, it's like running, it's like weightlifting, it's like anything else, it's a skill. You want to lift heavier, guess what? You gotta lift heavier amounts. You want to run faster, you gotta practice running faster. If you're expecting to just show up and do these things and going perfectly well, you're into a rude awakening, which is probably going to start being maybe the cycle even further. So yeah, so setting some potential time, which is why it's like over the past few talks, it's do hard things, continue to do hard things with this new perspective of understanding what's happening and how to overcome those. But now you have tools to practice in real time. Before we questions on anything we discussed, for those that are still obviously not have full understanding.
Thanks for putting something like that. For the mantra slide, you had those 4 different tools as far as there's like identify. There you go.
Identity,
yeah,
evidence, reframe, and motivation.
In your experience, are those like 4 equal like slices of the pie, or is this something where like you would hack the identity first, get resonate, go forward?
I think it depends on the individual, right? Like if someone who doesn't believe in who they are and what they can do, right? Identity is probably not mantra to use at first until they start building a body of evidence of like, oh no, you actually are this kind of person. So someone like that might, like someone who's like super fragile in terms of like an emotional scale, motivation might be the best one. How do you get them to keep moving? And as they practice their offline tools and building that body of evidence of like, here's all the hard things you've done and successful at, then you can start showing evidence, the reframe as they start to understand the science a little better, or the scenarios a little better. And then as they start to understand that, it creates a different identity for the person. It's like someone who's walking to the gym for the first time in 30 years, or even doesn't know how to fit. They might identify themselves as like an ex-athlete, right? And if that's the case, like, they're referring to them as they don't believe that they're still an athlete or a person. And how do you get into the person, the current identity?
How do you know when it's time to recover and not have that under recovery, and then when it's time to use the tools and push through when you're in a stressful situation?
You know best. Your body, you know your body best. I would say, in my experience, most people are under recovery, not overtraining. It's pretty hard to overtrain for the general population. So if you're feeling exhausted, tired, you're probably doing something wrong in terms of your sleep, your nutrition. Those are big rocks.
Or could it be your mind though telling you that? That's where I'm like saying like
Yeah, I mean it could be, but I would say it's more likely to be your sleep or your nutrition. Something else is happening. Because there's no way you should be feeling negative 100%. If you're feeling negative like 20%, like that's probably relatively normal. But it shouldn't be like a daily task where I suck, I have to do this. Now we're talking to some deeper level, deeper layers. That's way above my qualification. That's all I consider something like counseling, therapy, to handle some of those issues. So I would say it's probably start with nutrition recovery first. But if it's things like constant daily fights to like get to the gym, do your workout, it's probably something else a little deeper that's going on. Any other questions? Real-time tools, offline tools? Yeah.
When you're coaching, what are your strategies to get the people you're working with to actually like commit to it and buy into it? Because some of these changes are like hard to feel immediate, feedback for. So you have to maybe like journal exactly when they used it, or what's your strategy there?
Generally journaling, or like sometimes I'll take notes, like mental notes of like, you did 30 pounds heavier 2 weeks ago. You can go and do this. Or you've done something way harder than this, and I'll give them the evidence. Because as a coach, I should have a lot of reserves for whatever I've done. So I'll give them that body of evidence. Sometimes it's literally a little bit tough to know, like, no, you're gonna push through this. But that's my job to understand. Are they actually struggling mentally, or are they actually like, they just got off a 14-hour flight from Australia, they've running on no sleep, like looking at the hours today. Sometimes a lot of times too, it's just education. Just like understanding, like, hey, like, you're telling yourself these stories because of X, Y, Z. We have evidence to prove otherwise. We're gonna push, here's how we're gonna do it. So sometimes just like giving them the extra little nudge of like, you got this, extra motivation that they're not telling themselves. When I was teaching a lot of like group classes, I would say above 40 seconds of work is when you start to see a lot of people just stop mid-set. And I would always yell to everybody, your mind's gonna quit way before you plan this. So there's no reason to stop. So understand the difference between wanting a break and needing one. If it just burns and it sucks, just keep pushing. But it's starting to bring awareness to that. Is usually my cause. So yeah, to answer your question, it's hard, but like usually it's just providing evidence, education back. Sometimes it's hard. I've been pretty lucky to have clients that have the opposite end of the problem of like, no, I'm gonna run through this wall. So not. Well, it's pretty frustrating. We have these other things down the road that we need to accomplish. So it's okay if you don't run through the wall today. Tomorrow we can run through the wall. So, very good question.
I've been doing the offline tools of the meditation and the breathing, trying to do something hard. The journaling is where I'm just not able to do it, and I think it's because at my age, I kind of feel like, well, it makes more sense for me to just go for another walk rather than sit down and write something down. I don't know what benefit can you clarify of how that might be a benefit to me rather than just doing something else, some action?
So the purpose of journaling often is just creating evidence. It's providing the evidence and proof that you can do what it does. Right? Or you do, like in your example we talked about last time, was the conversation of wanting a break and seeing no longer that this is going to start again. Figuring out why that is. So if riding physically is challenging for you to do, and you want to go for a walk, right? You're kind of diverting away from giving the hard work to out a little bit. Two, you can just go on a walk and like, just give yourself like a list, journal that way as you're thinking. A lot of times you
That I'd rather do, because,
like if it's gonna work, right? Again, like we said today, if it's not sticking and it's creating more friction than it is helping, like don't do it. Figure out what's gonna work to give you the same. There's multiple ways to do this anyways.
well, because I think going well,
Yeah, so like just use a voice note to yourself. Use that as and then have it transcribed. And that way you can have a library of stuff. So I would do that personally.
do you find it helpful to look at your notes about yourself, not being a coach or helping somebody else, but actually looking back at what you've done? I mean, I know what I've done, so I kind of thought, well, why do I need to write it down? I know what I've
When you
done.
write it down physically, it turns into a book.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
shift into like, oh, it's a thought, like this idea, into like, oh, it's like a physical.
But was it just a thought? I mean, it wasn't an idea. I actually did do these things.
It just shifts the perspective. It shifts the perspective of like, it's living in here, now it's being actually physically produced somewhere else. And it brings it outside of you.
But do you go back? I mean, is it helpful to actually go back and reread those notes?
Right? And it doesn't have to be like doesn't have to be written handwritten notes. It could be something like photos of like a race. If you've done an Ironman, like looking at your photos of your Ironman, oh yeah, I've done some Ironman stuff. It doesn't have to always be written. Written is just the first step. Usually it's an easy option for a lot of people. Especially people who don't have a big body of evidence to go off of. People who like are just starting to figure these things out. They might have not gone out of their comfort zone much their whole lives. So it's like, okay, where in your life is physically challenging, mentally challenging? And that could be something as simple as like, I ran a 5K. But like, that's step one. And having that build as you start doing other things. And it's just like when you're working with somebody, you're trying to achieve your fitness goals. It's like, how do you prove that you're making progress and not just doing work? Right? Because there's a difference between being busy and making progress. Right? People do busy work in the gym all the time, and zero progress. So how do you differentiate? You gotta start measuring things, you gotta start logging things, right? Just like anything else. If you don't have progressive measures, who's to say you're not in the same place you were 6 years ago? I've done 135 pounds in squat. Yeah, sure. When? I don't know, like 6 years ago or so. Okay, well, when was it? Because as things go on and as we start to create more memories, right, we start to lose details. So as you start writing these down, they might pull more details out, bring back fresh memories, and it helps with creating a deeper level of memories. Any other questions?
Can you put a slide as a second to last?
Okay, so yeah, that's, again, this is probably the shortest one because it's the most actionable, it's the easiest. It's probably the one that makes the most sense for most people. You've probably heard of a few examples of this in the past. But again, lay the groundwork first. This is your executable thing. I will send these to Chris. Rex. Thank you.
so we could.
They do some hard shit in here.
Maybe a brace too.
Yeah.
At least quickly, as far as this being like the most practical outside model on this, it'd be like in real time. What's like the newest part of this that you kind of added on? Is it all kind of, I'm viewed as something like, hey, you know, the chunking is something I've added recently.
So, this is actually a presentation that my boss and I have been working on the last few years. Granted, he did 90% of it. The newest part's probably the beginning. Some of the concepts of how to break down different areas of your mindset. Our goal usually is just to keep it simple and actionable. Just like the body, not much has changed in terms of our understanding of it. We have a pretty solid understanding of how the mind works. The mind is a little bit of a monster, but like because it's so complex, and just like nutrition, like it could be 100 different things. But what's like the 2 or 3 foundational pieces that we can move that will actually move the needle? These are called some easiest tools to use and execute. Because he likes to
I know those
go.
goals,
But
but
when things get hard,
for the bigger goals,
he just tries to do everything.
is why
He's thinking of the 100 reasons why he can't do something, so he's gonna try to get straight.
Is just to like be able to do
When
it
I called him out on
play
his
with her all day,
not
not
run,
run.
I was trying to
Hold
get him
muscle
reps.
or
Right.
so
Me
Me
sore.
too, same
We're
thing.
handling
Yeah,
like this issue with your foot.
I can't.
We need to
That's
low
the
tolerance
biggest- and just
heal in
age
your foot.
as well as I can.
So we don't blow up 6 weeks
Right.
from now. Like I'm not concerned
That's
about
what,
tomorrow.
I don't really
I'm
write
concerned
it down.
about 6 weeks from now.
So I'll tell you what, I did
That's
ask.
the thing in your foot.
I'm not an expert on this at all, and I usually don't.
So,
I've been told so many
How
times.
does
so
that
I did
spiral
sit
work
down last
exactly? So
night
he's
and wrote
going
down,
great
like,
on like I
bunch
do
of
hard
things
things,
I
I do
did
hard
differently.
things, and then
And I
suddenly it's an
realized
obstacle and he goes like,
that
whoa, I
when
gotta
I wrote
like
them down,
overcome all those hard things.
Because
Or,
now he thinks of every reason why he can't do something. He thinks of every reason
I
why
did that.
it's
Yeah,
gonna be
yeah,
hard.
yeah.
I did that.
Yeah.
And then
And
I
then he
saw
tries to
posted
solve all
a
those
picture
issues
that
at
shows
once.
Chris
He does-
the other
he does like a
day,
shotgun
came in,
match.
which is like.
And he just throws some shit at the wall and hopes something sticks.
But
Because
they don't
I don't know what to focus on.
And then
they're all on
they
that way.
always are setting a higher bar for themselves.
Versus like, hey, let's like slow
Always
down.
trying to be better and they haven't,
What can you do right now?
haven't gotten where they wanted to be.
But now you're doing this one, it's 2 less miles on.
Right, right.
Am I writing
Let's
it
get some
down?
better shoes back on.
Actually saw how I did this.
Yeah.
So check that box.
Like when
Now
Chris
let's
says
focus
when
on
you started at
whatever
150 this week, that means something.
Let's add second day
Yeah, yeah.
sprints.
I can feel
Oh, we're still doing it. Okay, nothing's changed.
my
Right? Good.
running and my
And we're gonna start to
cycling,
layer on these volumes.
all of this
Training.
It's only here.
Now we're checking all these boxes until he gets this idea of something else,
It's
and then he tries to solve the issue.
Yeah,
Like that's his.
it's been
That's his
a
year and a half.
January.
Yeah.
It took me 9
We're doing well. We're feeling better. We're feeling good.
3 to 4
Oh,
days
shit.
a week working on
Go
mine.
back
Oh,
over here.
hold on.
I can't do all these things. I'm gonna fail.